welcome to everybody who's joining us on today's webinar. So I'd like to first of all introduce my colleague Luke Butcher, who's from our wonderful product development team. My name is Matthew. I look after Southwestern schools in the UK. I'm here what we call an IDL and interventions advisor. We're in an Alice room, our IDL Alice room, where we'll be, of course, walking you through some of our findings in both the dyslexia world and how then IDL created resources to cater to pupils who, would essentially need to use them via your school profiles. Sometimes if a mum and dad want to use the resources at home, that does come included. But I'll talk about, of course, access arrangements towards the end of the presentation today. To give you a little bit more background about IDL, we've existed for around 30 years now, developing solutions for those who do need support with SEN. We started out with the literacy program, eventually branched out to create a dyscalculia program, also a numeracy program that accommodates pupils and learners in regards to their math skills. And now we've also got wonderful IDL well-being, which also promotes positive emotional awareness. But we will also, together with Sean, create more webinars for you guys to come to, be able to book a free demo, a free trial of IDL, and explore our resources. If I hand over to my colleague Luke for the first half of the presentation today, Luke will focus his presentation a little bit on our findings in the world of dyslexia, and then I'll take over after Luke is finished. I will now just mute myself.
And I will unmute myself so you don't get us in stereo. And hopefully this will work when I attempt to share my screen. Just as Matthew's explained, hi, my name is Luke. I'm part of the product development team here at IDL. We make a wide selection of programs to assist with key stage, well, 1 and 2, but also to higher levels. There we go. This should work. Famous last words. And I'm going to be talking a little bit today about the well-trodden land of dyslexia. Is that showing correctly? Are you just getting my whole screen? You're getting my whole screen.
I can see the whole screen.
I do so love technology. Well, I was going to say Zoom specifically. Right, there we go. So, dyslexia or disorganizing difficulties. I'm aware that I misspelled it. It's all part of the game. So, dyslexia is a well-trodden subject. I'm certain that I'm not going to be actually telling anybody that's on this call anything that they probably already haven't heard, although if I do, great, fantastic. It's all about sharing knowledge. In this particular case, I'm going to be going over, in a very flyover way, the main strands of learning that are impacted by dyslexic type difficulties or disorganizing difficulties that affect literacy. And how we have found it useful to develop our screeners in the hope that this information being passed on to you will help you make more insightful observations in the classroom. If you want to use our programs for that, great. If not, then at least you'll be a little bit more savvy with how dyslexia can manifest at the key stage 1-2 level. Now, as presumably neurotypical literate pupils, there are a number of strands of understanding that are integral to decoding and putting together the words on a page. These can begin with something as simple as the sounds of letters, the good old phoneme-grapheme correspondence, which can then impact things. Difficulty with these fundamental building blocks of literacy and decoding and understanding will predominantly be made manifest through spelling tests. Regular testing leads to all manners of anxiety, and I can talk anybody's ear off about the psychological impediments of long-term progressive and repetitive exams. We're not here to talk about that today. However, a spelling test is best delivered in person due to, and this is something I often find myself saying, it's not about what they get wrong, it is about how they get it wrong. So I'll be covering the more specific presentations of types of dyslexia in a bit, but one of them is the very archetypical, you're swapping your P's and Q's, your B's and D's around due to the disorganizing impact on your working memory and the way that visual data is processed. A digital platform would not necessarily be able to pick that up. Unless it had been designed that way, and frankly, the pattern recognition technology isn't quite there yet. I know we're living in the golden age of AI, but we've still got a little bit of work to do in that regard. But a good old-fashioned spelling test will begin to indicate if a child has more archetypical presentations of dyslexia, as I've just mentioned. Sound discrimination is another way that that imperfect understanding at such a fundamental level can manifest itself. So hearing but not quite being able to connect that to the grapheme is one of the ways that it can present itself. Moving on from that, we have pattern recognition. Now, in dyscalculic or numerical type disorganizing difficulties, pattern recognition is a lot easier to identify. 1, 3, 5, 7. What do all these numbers have in common? Find the next two numbers in this sequence. You can't exactly do that with literacy outside of ABCs or identify what vowels are. So any screener that is taking a more holistic overview of a child's literary understanding should include some element of, can you identify what the vowels are? Are you able to identify them in a written form? And can you correlate that language, that knowledge, across to the spoken language variant? Words being able to decode on an audio basis. This also accommodates for learners that might have some form of visual impediment as well. Their linguistic ability may be entirely 100%. They may suffer from no sort of dyslexic type difficulty, but they might have terrible eyesight, citing myself as an example here. So if they are able to listen to a spoken form and then transcribe that into a digital or analog, if you want to use the technical term for a pen and paper, then that would help identify if they have some particular form of processing difficulty along the alphabetical family. Sound blending, everybody loves phonics. The necessity of the knowledge now to be able to read a word, segment it according to our good old synthetic phonics, and then being able to stick it back together again in a cohesive, coherent, and reliable fashion. These are all skills that are impacted by dyslexia. Not only is that information unlikely to be efficiently embedded the first time around, if they're unable to actually correctly decode the words on a page, they will not be able to correlate that with the spoken form. Phoneme grapheme correspondence, that's something that's going to come up a lot today. So if they are unable to view graphemes as independent units of a word, might be dyslexic. Or might be a point of weakness in their overall learning, which is something I will dip into a little bit further on. Sequences, I've actually already spoken about that. And finally, ordering. Again, more of a thing to do with dyscalculia. However, with the ordering of sentences, with the ordering that letters appear in words, some forms of dyslexia are more prone to swapping the position of letters in a word, or indeed words in a sentence on a vertical basis, as understanding the visual composition of lines on a paper and margins can be a strong indicator of dyslexic type tendencies. So now I've told you what you can be looking for. Now I'm just going to flip that on the head and contradict pretty much everything I've just said with, here are some of the problems that can be encountered with screening specifically for archetypical dyslexic presentations. And the first and biggest of those, as I always say, is subjective experience. Any test is only as good as the person who is delivering it. Every TA will understand their pupil in a way that no paper-based or digital screener ever can. A good platform or a good methodology for screening for these things will take that into account. So the subjective experience of the person delivering that test, if they are sat down with a child on a one-on-one, which I realize in today's hectic classrooms is very much the ideal and not necessarily the reality, but if they are sat down with a pupil that they suspect might have dyslexic type tendencies, and they know that little Timmy is always confusing his T's and lowercase j's, so when that begins to manifest in a screening test, that is definitely a supporting piece of evidence for dyslexia. However, if Timmy just didn't get much sleep that night and for some reason has decided to swap around his T's and lowercase j's, which isn't something that they usually do in class, that is not evidence of a dyslexic type tendency. That is just life. So no digital or analog platform is really going to be able to accommodate for that, as I say, subjective experience, that lived knowledge of that pupil. Lacking vocabulary. If a 7-year-old is presented with a list of words and there happens to be a particular word on there that they have never seen before in their entire life, so you hand the 5-year-old, here's a list of words, compromise is on there. How many 5-year-olds you know that are familiar with compromise? Answer, not many. So the ability to separate their known vocabulary from what they might know is important in screening for dyslexia. There is no point in looking for them to misspell a word that they've never known how to spell in the first place. Now, when it comes to literacy over numeracy, the content is taught in a much more formulaic, progressive, scaffolded manner. However, that does not necessitate that the reading books that they've been given will have those specific words that are being tested in them. So again, it's something to bear in mind that if a child is getting a word wrong in a test that is devoid of any other context, maybe they've just never seen that word before in their life. Environmental problems. Dyslexia, being a disorganizing difficulty, has a profound impact on the working memory. The working memory is your brain's RAM. It is how many things you can think of at any given time. It is how many plates you can keep spinning. In maths, it is the thing that impacts upon your long division, your ability to pull facts from your long-term recollection and keep them in mind whilst you're doing the next stage. In literacy, it is context. It is, I've read a whole sentence about what Jeremy the grasshopper has been doing. And in this one sentence, it has described 2 actions that Jeremy has taken. However, this sentence is part of a longer paragraph. And by the time they've gotten to the end of it, they've already forgotten what Jeremy's name is, let alone that he's a grasshopper that was weaving a basket. Environmental problems heavily impact on one's working memory. If you're in a hectic classroom where there is noise, where there are the flicking of rubbers or the twanging of rulers, or just the teacher talking, depending on the severity of one's dyslexic difficulties, that can really screw with how they are able to decode the information on the page, how they're able to listen if it is a spoken word story. And this will impact the efficacy and accuracy of any screener that is being delivered. In an ideal world, any screener would be able to be delivered in a vacuum. They would be able to be put under exam type conditions. But is that the ideal? Because then you start encountering elements of perceptions of being tested, of inadequacy, of insecurities, and ultimately anxiety. And anxiety and the subsequent release of cortisol has a further impact on one's working memory. So it becomes a self-defeating spiral of these poor pupils that may only be a little dyslexic, but then perhaps being perceived as having a much more disorganized difficulty. Or alternatively, pupils that are insecure, uncertain readers that have no dyslexic type difficulties, but are now being screened as having such because, frankly, they're in an exam condition and very few people thrive under that sort of pressure. Poor decoding skills. If English is their second language, if they are not very confident written word decoders, but are able to audibly segment and understand if a word is spelled out to them. If they have some element of ADD or focus difficulty, then they might not be dyslexic, but due to those other difficulties, they will struggle to engage with the level of accuracy that's required within any sort of traditional dyslexia screener. Are there visual difficulties? This can range from, do they wear glasses? Do they have them that day? Do they have some form of undiagnosed visual problem? Do they require colored films and that hasn't been identified? All those resources simply aren't present on that day. Very subjective, very contextual, but also very important. Finding time. Ordinarily, screeners are done at any new intake. However, I would personally recommend that they're done at the beginning of every scholastic year. Obviously, somebody is not going to suddenly manifest dyslexia unless, touch wood, that this never happens, that they've suffered some kind of traumatic injury that has led to them acquiring dyslexia. But what you might find is that as they've been exposed to increasingly sophisticated verbiage, that they might begin to increasingly struggle with words because they might have a more mild presentation of dyslexia. When it comes to finding time, obviously this is a benefit of digital platforms in that they are much easier to deploy en masse to a whole class, rather than removing one class from one child at a time from the average class size of 33, 34, for probably a good 20 to 30 minutes to deliver a screener. Yeah, that's a lot of time for a single child to be blipping in and out of a class. Who's got that kind of resource at their disposal? As I've already touched on when I was talking about poor decoding skills, listening comprehension, massive part of it, the ability to focus on long stories and hold that much information in their heads. Since I've already covered that one, I'll take a slight adjunct here to activities such as the big write. These are things that a dyslexic type learner will find more difficult, not least of all because of their trouble to scribe and correctly form correctly written words. But what they might also struggle with due to that impact on their working memory is just the ability to form a cohesive story. If they end up repeating or rewriting sentences that they've already done, this can be an indicator of disorganizing type difficulties. So moving on from those, there are some useful terms that people might find educational as well as effective when it comes to recommending support and interventions for a learner that they suspect might have a dyslexic type difficulty. It's all very well and good saying, well, they're not very good at spelling. When it comes to dictation, they're a bit spotty. They're able to form fantastic stories and speak them, but when you ask them to put it on paper, it just becomes an incomprehensible mess. Saying that to the majority of Senkos will be very, like a light switch will immediately come on. Like they'll be like, okay, you're ticking a lot of boxes there. But when it comes to getting those recommendations for further support, I have found that having the specific forms of what manifestations of dyslexia you think they might have could come in handy, as well as just an overall understanding of how we as humans learn things good. And synaptogenesis, one of my favorite words, because it's basically just the formation of, I say basically, it is the scientific term for learning things. It is the creation of synapses in the brain. But when you say synaptogenesis, it sounds a lot more professional than learning things. So the way that we engage with reality around us is via our senses. As a rule, unless they have some other form of learning difficulty or disability, these will not be impacted in of themselves. Visual, they might wear glasses. Auditory, they may have some form of hearing aid, or haptic touching, they may have some form of mobility issue. Once that information has been absorbed by your fleshy meat suit, it is then passed into your working memory. The things that you can see around you at this moment, the obnoxious sound of my voice, my face moving on the screen, the information on my presentation at this moment, these are all factors that are being fed into your working memory. You are processing all of these things simultaneously. The relevant part of that, depending on the efficacy of your working memory, will then be passed into your long-term memory. And that's where the wheels start coming off this wagon when it comes to dyslexic learners. One, as I've already repeatedly said, dyslexia is a disorganizing type difficulty, which reduces the amount of working memory. That information is also less effectively encoded into your long-term memory. There are three forms of information that we store: declarative, procedural, and conditional. They are all affected predominantly the same. Obviously, way back when I was doing my teaching degree, we were taught about the various learning methods. There are kinesthetic learners, there are visual learners, there are auditory learners. Those are very broad generalities, and everybody's going to exist at some level on any of these. What is important to know about the dyslexic learner is that it is likely that they will all be impacted along the same level to the same extent. It's mostly upon their own preferences as to how they engage more effectively with their learning. The affective domain, i.e. how much one enjoys something, is a big part of education as a rule. If people aren't interested, they're not listening. If they're not listening, they're not learning. So the way we encode memories via synaptogenesis, there is a strong chemical element to it. It's broadly how trauma works. If something is a massive negative experience, that synaptic connection is much, much stronger and harder to forget. If we have no emotional connection to that recollection or memory, then via pruning, that memory is more likely to be forgotten. Obviously, I go straight to trauma. Positive emotions are also very strong and harder to forget. We'd like to think that pupils err more towards that was a really engaging lesson than, oh, please don't send me back. So two of the other ways that dyslexia, sorry, just occasionally trying myself slipping into dyscalculia. Dyslexia impacts learning forms. I've just touched on the bottom there. Visual spatial issues, that's not necessarily dyspraxia. It means that they might struggle to cope with the visualization of distance, like the difference between a meter and a mile, a centimeter and an inch. And long, short-term visual memory issues. As I've said with Jeremy the Grasshopper, if they can't remember what they've just read, then moving forwards, they're just going to become increasingly confused and baffled, and this will further impact their working memory. So I'm almost out of time on my bit, so I'll just zoom through these bits. There are a multitude of forms of dyslexia. These are, one of them here, dysgraphia isn't strictly dyslexia, but we'll, come to that. I find when I'm explaining this sort of vast spectrum of difficulties, this cornucopia of complications, it is not a spectrum. A spectrum implies that there is a line when we come to these things. Whereas if you actually look at the technical term for spectrum, i.e. a light being refracted, it becomes an infinite multitude, a rainbow, that only grows wider the further the light source, the closer the light source comes to the prism. I like to think of it as one of those big old sci-fi star maps where it exists in all three dimensions. And over here, you've got phonological dyslexia. Over there, you've got double deficit. Over here, you've got auditory difficulties. Any child will have a multitude of directional lines pointing to any of these. Any adult, any living person will have more proficiency in some of these departments than others. You might not be a great listener. My hearing's not fantastic, but when it comes to reading words, you may be incredibly acute. So with a lot of these, so double deficit, I've already covered several of these in my previous ramblings. Double deficit dyslexia roughly comes down to, it means that you will have two presentations. It means you have profound and fairly comprehensive dyslexic type difficulties. Auditory dyslexia means you may not be able to decode words that are spoken to you or segment them as effectively as you can write them. Now, dysgraphia is the explicit difficulty with handwriting, the scribing of words onto paper. This is ordinarily connected to some form of dyspraxia or hand-eye coordination type problem, but, and here's the fun part, it's not necessarily the case. Some people's might be graceful and lithe, but just really struggle with putting pen to paper, writing within the lines, understanding the margin. Yeah, there's a number of ways that that can impact upon a pupil's learning. Visual dyslexia is a lot closer to your P's and Q's, words seeming to shift and move in front of you. Rapid naming tends to be more of a kind of prolonged effort. They may be less effective at recalling phoneme grapheme correspondence, but will eventually get there. This can also be connected to difficulties in patterns. Yeah, so that's the broad generalities of type of dyslexia. These things will be available afterwards. I will share the presentation on my notes. I couldn't get a QR code working, but hopefully next time I'll be able to have that so you can scroll along with it as well as read along with my notes should the odious sound of my narration grow too much. And also, you yourself may have some form of auditory dyslexia, and I should be more accessible. So I'm going to wind my part down now. Thank you all for listening, and I will hand back to Matthew.
Thank you, Luke, very much for that in-depth look into, of course, some of your research. Luke has prepared a few more slides, which, like he just kindly mentioned, we will make available to anybody that would like to see them after today's presentation. If you'd like to just reach out to myself or Sean, what we'll do is, we'll send you a copy of this. And if you've got any questions for us, more so if you've got any feedback, we would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. So I'll begin with my piece of the presentation today. I'll give you a little bit of a background about IDL, what we actually look like as a team, and most of all, what kind of resources we can provide you with. So if you just give me a minute, I'll just get everything started. And from what I understand, there will be a little bit of a Q&A session straight after our presentation today. So if you already know some of the questions from Luke's presentation, please feel free to pop them into the space that Sean has so kindly made available to us. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, IDL has existed for around 30 years now. We're getting to the moment where we're actually going to be a team strong of around 30 to 40 individuals who look after, of course, certain areas in the UK, like Luke does, product development side of things, making sure that, we do and, enhance the program that we provide you with up-to-date research that is, of course, available in regards to the resources we give you access to. In front of you, you've got the entire interventions team. So Adrian Gallagher, our deputy head of IDL, and we are led also by Sarah Hislop, who also looks after Northwestern schools, but manages the rest of us here as part of the interventions team. We've got David, who will look after any inquiries to do with Buckinghamshire, Yorkshire. We do all share a little bit of every area together. We've got Ryan, who is our partnerships manager, looks after Scottish schools, Northeastern schools. Jackie, who is more based in Wales, Staffordshire area, Birmingham. Myself, who looks after Wiltshire, Hampshire, as well as southwestern regions such as Cornwall up to West Sussex. And we've got Sam, who looks after, of course, London and southeastern schools. To give you a little bit of an idea, we now work with around 4,200 schools across the UK. Some schools are now starting to inquire about our resources internationally as well. If you happen to be from the USA and have joined us today, feel free to also request the access to our resources. We'll make them, of course, available to you. And to give you an idea about statistics, we're used by around 282,000 pupils. I like to say that's getting closer to 300,000 by the minute. 12,000 daily average users do log into our lessons, with a 37,000 daily average lessons being completed between mainly numeracy and literacy. However, well-being fits into that number as well. So we've got a wonderful customer services team. If you do trial with us, if you do have a demo of our resources, and more so if you do end up actually subscribing to our resources and using them at your school, not only will you have access to the support that product development give you, us as the interventions advisor, our wonderful engineers team, but also our wonderful award-winning customer services team. Read by the lovely Roseanne here. We've got Beth, we've got Annette, we've got Jasmine and Hannah, who will always help you, with any queries you may have. Outside of us, DIAs arranging your training sessions, they will always be readily available to answer any questions you may have specifically to the usage of the program. If you want another training session from us, those are always free to join. And customer services do enjoy organizing a multi-school session. As you can see, we've got a wonderful satisfaction score. We've got some amazing references here from other schools who have already used us at IDL. And 9 times out of 10, we've got an extremely satisfied customer who uses the program. So I was talking about product development team, who, again, I would just like to extend my thanks to my colleague Luke today, who has kindly, given his time and agreed to join us. We'll hopefully be collaborating more and more sessions like this, themed around dyscalculia, themed around our research for the well-being element, as well as giving you access to, partners that we work with like Sean and other resources that they provide, depending on, of course, what kind of environment you have. The reason I brought Luke along to today's meeting is because I wanted to show off the knowledge and the in-depth knowledge behind our program, but also to give you confidence that the entire program is developed in-house. We do, of course, use technology to the best of our advantage, as, of course, the technological world is growing. Our aim is to provide your learners, any learner realistically, whether you're a tutor or school, a parent who's just looking for the right solution for, for their child. We try and give you ease of access to full flexible reporting, as well as, of course, an in-depth picture outside, as well as of an intervention, which will close any of those neural quality gaps that we may have recognized within a pupil or a learner's journey. So, to give you a little bit of a taster, I'm going to talk about the ideal teacher interface. So this is with both mom and dad, parents, teachers, Senkos, anybody essentially using the ideal platform will have access to. Not only do we give you access to bespoke one-to-one training sessions, upcoming training dates, webinars like today, we give you a full ease of access in regards to setting up your pupils, booking and those training sessions with us, as well as scheduling any types of tests, which, can I point out, do come free and included as part of your, intervention programs if you do indeed choose to subscribe. We, of course, give you the ability to review the data that those tests provide you with, see how accurately IDL places your pupils according to their learning needs on each program, be that literacy or numeracy. This is what ideal literacy will look like a little bit more from the pupil's perspective. So not only do we cater, of course, to the teachers, mum and dads, Senkos, specialists, tutors out there using the program with their learners, we always have the pupils or the learners' comfort at the forefront of our minds as well. So we give them access to a lovely program. We've got ease of access in regards to being able to make that program accessible via devices such as iPads, Chromebooks, with free apps being now available to download. We offer laptop support, but what the pupil has access to is a comfortable pupil space where they can modify it, they can see the current lesson that they are up to. We provide some wonderful extras such as typing book, spelling book, ABC book, which all cater to another range of pupils with foundation type lessons who want to, for example, maybe just increase their confidence in regards to their spelling skills without the need to take any test. The main area, of course, are our screeners, both numeracy and literacy, that as well as the intervention programs. We've got a wonderful times table tool, which I'll of course talk more in depth about during our Dyscalculia webinar, and where we can also explore the little niches of the numeracy by strand program. So to give you an idea of the content we give pupils access to, and I'm just going to bring the video up here a little bit. Once we do choose to enroll a pupil, if we've screened a pupil and in fact they do actually come out with certain areas that we do need to give them a little bit of support with, we do give them access to a very, very vast program that will practice 5 different areas of literacy abilities with them, going from spelling, comprehension, storytelling, sentence building type exercises through to dictation. We keep them quite varied. We try, of course, to keep the pupils engaged, not only giving them, a variety of lessons, but there's quite a lot of engagement tools. We have a star system that will award them for everything that they do correctly, as well as lovely trophies that will award them for completing most activities that they do on the program. And you'll find that they're logging actually in very, very independently eventually. Once we kind of get them going after a few sessions, that all your pupils need to do is spend about an hour a week on the program, and that hour can be split between school time and home time as well. Of course, we give you the tools that you need to measure pupils' ability levels. So not only will you get an overview of how your pupils are performing, whether we indeed do have any pupils that, may just not like a test. So those pupils that we don't need to worry about, IDL will also tell you about them and give you comfort of sending them back to the classrooms. Outside of that, we use a flag up system if we have indeed recognized a specific area that we might be a little bit concerned about, and we do then give you an in-depth look into the pupil's profile, allowing you to measure how we've exactly how they have performed per area that we have screened for, giving you access to incorrect answers, as well as allowing you to see in more in depth whether a pupil has a specific learning area that is marked as below average. Moving on, there's another way to measure your pupils' ability levels, and partially that's actually once they've been enrolled to the program and started completing the work. What IDEAL does, which I like to point out the most, is the fact that it almost assigns a unique learning plan according to your pupils' needs. So not only do we give you the screening tool, we also provide you with a baseline assessment that will highlight what their ages are, what their actual reading ability levels are in regards to an age measure, and spelling ability levels as well. Based on that, IDL selects automatically a unique starting point for your pupil and gives them a number of lessons to complete and a number of selected modules from our lesson count. Down here, what we can see a little bit more is how a pupil, and I mean, this is Bart Simpson, of course, so it is a test pupil, but you can see how they are performing in regards to the star scores too that they achieve, which will then allow you to have a little bit more in-depth understanding of certain areas that may need a little bit of extra support. So I do invite you, of course, to give our resource a try. So why not try it? It's free. That's sort of what I like to say. We provide you with 2 weeks completely free access, which will allow you to, of course, test the screener with your pupils as if you were a live subscribed customer. Have an IDL demo with us where we will, of course, explain the functionality, teach you how to use the admin element, set your pupils up, give you access to a number of resources such as our standardization scores, which will help you understand how each specific year group should perform according to the screeners that we provide them with. So booking a free trial is extremely easy, as well as booking a demo is extremely easy. So something I would like to point out again is that our trials and demos are fully free of charge, and they do not oblige you to purchase the program in any way, however, give you a lovely chance to essentially test it with your pupils, your home users, when you please and as you please. We're extremely flexible in regards to organizing demos. We'll always answer any of your questions. If we don't know the answers to them, we again have lovely colleagues like Luke who will try and help us find the answer to that question. I invite you all to actually come along to the landing page that we have created here together with SEND Group. Not only does it give you the opportunity to have access to their resources, which we lead you back to the website, or we can ask you about, if you'd like more from a parental point of view, have access to the Studying with Dyslexia blog or SEND Group community. We try and collaborate quite a lot in regards to offering access to our resources together. But most of all, you will come to a free trial submission form, which will automatically ask you, of course, just to fill in some simple details such as your school postcode, an admin email where we should send the access to. But this will be your starting point from us, where we'll create the trial. We'll do some regular check-ins with you, making sure that you are okay using it. If you do need a short extension, we can, of course, have that conversation as well. So, for everybody that has joined us today, I would like to say a massive thank you. I have created a QR code here that I hope works. When I did test it, it did work. My contact details are here for you with my complicated surname. I've also given you our customer services email, which is a little bit easier to type out. And you've, of course, got the lovely Shan, who has invited us today to do the webinar. So if you send her an email, also requesting access to our resources, I'll be more than happy to set that up for you with the help of Shan, and hopefully we can get you catered to and get you started. I do invite you to touch base with us just before the Christmas holidays do begin, because we will be offering some extended trial opportunities. If you've got any questions to myself or to Luke, please post them again in the Q&A section now. Shan, a massive thank you to yourself. This wraps me up from my side of the presentation as well.
Oh, just waiting for my video to kick back in. There we go. That was brilliant. Thank you, chaps. That was great. I absolutely love the whole sort of ethos and everything behind this. The fact that you've gone into such detail in terms of the way it's approached and the different levels of dyslexia and looking at the whole spectrum. It's just great. I love it. And I think schools and individual pupils will definitely benefit from this. I know that the schools that use it already obviously do, but the more schools that you can get into, the better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that feedback as well, because yes, it is about, of course, providing schools with access to the correct resources as well. So I invite you all just to come and chat to us. We're part of a charity. We're, very easy to speak to. Shan, I hope, can vouch for that as well. Sometimes a little bit nervous, but yes, again, I kindly appreciate that. If you're from a council settings, we do work with local authorities, other providers such as SEND Group. So not only are we a resource ourselves, we've also got access to wonderful partners like Shan, like the SEND Group provide, where we can direct you in the right, a direction if you've got indeed a question.
I mean, I will happily connect anybody that isn't able to get your email address down at this stage or anything, but I think everybody will. And I checked, I quickly tried the QR code, and it's up and running and works just fine.
Superb.
So anybody wants to click on that, they can. There are still a few people here, so if anybody does have any questions, I'm sure hopefully you two wouldn't mind too much hanging on a couple of minutes to see if there are any questions that come up in the Q&A box. But absolutely great. And I think I've learned a new word today, and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to say it again. Synaptogenesis.
That was my favorite as well.
Yeah, that's my new word now.
Synaptogenesis, yeah.
Synaptogenesis, right? That's my new word, because I'm always going on about learning stuff.
Not going to turn up on Sesame Street anytime soon.
No, it's great, and I think and I think part of that did lead into your point really nicely, that sometimes students hit a ceiling because they work through and they work through and they work through, and then they just hit a ceiling, and you suddenly go, oh, they might actually be dyslexic, because things carry on going, and the words that we use with them, the words that they're seeing, they become more complex, and the spellings become more complex, and they just can't go up the next level to those. So I think that was really good. Yeah.
I think giving them a program that's kind of like anxiety free, I like to call it. And, guys have brilliantly also designed it in a way that's multisensory. So we always do try and keep the forefront of the pupil in our mind, not only because of that aspect that, like Luke said in his presentation, cortisol is a little bit of an enemy of learning. We want to give them access to a program that's easy to use, comfortable, but also user friendly.
That's it. And it's looking at the platform and seeing how it's been used by a variety of students. It is so easy to see that cortisol levels can be lowered. The working memory can start to step up again because they're not feeling that kind of level of anxiety that they do when they're in a test situation or Absolutely. There are different things going on. Because I think we do quite often forget or just put it to the back of our minds that things like that really do affect working memory and the capacity that the brain has to function at its sort of highest level or the level that you need at that point. So yeah, excellent.
100%. I look forward to doing a talk on dyscalculia as well, Sian. So keep an eye on Sian's website and on our LinkedIn and social media posts, because we'll be sharing lots. And to tie into the anxiety level, keep an eye out for IDL Wellbeing webinar, which again we'll organize with the help of lovely Sian here, where we'll talk about a little bit more about the program we've created to build positive affirmations, perhaps resolve an anxiety or a worry that a pupil may have, but give them access to a nice little area where we can give them a little bit of a break between the exercises.
Absolutely. And that it just feeds into everything, the well-being. It's just at the core of so much when we're working with young people. So much.
Thank you for that,
That's
Sian.
one of my personal hobby horses. Well, there we go.
Have we got any questions at all that we might answer?
No, we don't. I think you two were just so on it and so informative that people have gone away and gone, yeah, I just need to have a look now. I have no questions currently. So it was just incredible. Luke, why don't we see you doing more talks?
This is my incentive. Why I invited him.
No, but seriously, pardon?
I plead the fifth.
No, but thank you both so much. It was absolutely fabulous, really informative, really easy to access in the way that your platform is, very multisensory in the way that your platform is, and there's lots to go away and for people to look at and to think about. And they've got the QR codes, they've got email addresses, they can touch base with any of us. So I think I'm going to bring the webinar to a close. So thank you again. It was very much appreciated, and I shall see you all again soon.
Likewise, Sian, thank you for the invite again. Luke, thank you for your hard work. And yes, to everybody, thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. All right then, goodbye.
Cheers, Sian. Bye-bye.
Bye.